Let's talk more about where we are in Ukraine. Lots of focus on the Middle East lately, but by the way, this horrific war in Ukraine sort of rumbling on. Well, let's talk about this with Sir Bill Browder. He's Putin's #1 foreign enemy. That's a great title to have. He's also head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. A very good afternoon to you.
Great to see you.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, Ukraine very much back in the news. Lots of hope from some of the things that Donald Trump has said about how you might be giving some long-range missiles to Ukraine to help them fight in the war effort against Putin. Apparently there was a phone call with Vladimir Putin, and what a surprise. Suddenly things seem to have changed. And in a meeting at the White House last Friday, it was understood now, reports claim that Trump got pretty angry with President Zelensky. Papers were thrown, voices were raised, and basically said, you need to take a ceasefire deal with Putin. Otherwise, Putin will, in his words, we are told, destroy Ukraine. What do you make of both the reports of that conversation, but also the strange thing we seem to see with Donald Trump seeming to sort of lurch from, I'm going to give Ukraine everything they need to fight Putin, and they need to give in to the terms of whatever Putin asks. What do you make of all of that?
Well, first and foremost, Putin has been trying to destroy Ukraine for 3.5 years. He's been trying to take over the country, and he hasn't succeeded. And so I don't think that Trump can tell Zelensky what Putin is going to do on the battlefield and have any more credibility than Zelensky has in his own mind about his position to defend himself. Second, Trump and the United States stopped supporting Ukraine militarily and financially when he became president for the second time. And so he's already sort of placed his cards where he wants them to be.
He'll sell weapons to the Europeans, and the Europeans have to use their own money to pay for the weapons and send them to Ukraine.
And thirdly, the Ukrainians are now no longer so desperately dependent on Western weapons. They have a huge defense industry themselves. They produce millions of drones every year. Drones are now what define the battlefield in Ukraine and in Russia. And for what it's worth, Ukraine has been steadily and slowly degrading Russia's economy by striking all of their oil refineries, gas plants, and so on. And so, I mean, I think this is all big theater. At the end of the day, it would have been nice if Trump had thrown his lot back in with Ukrainians, as he appeared to be doing. He gave a speech at the UN about a week ago talking about how Ukraine could actually win this war. Then there was the talk of Ukraine, or the U.S. supplying Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, but otherwise it's just just a lot of noise. And this Budapest meeting that Trump intends to have with Putin, well, they can decide whatever they want in that meeting, but there's not going to be a deal done with Ukraine on terms that Ukrainians don't want to agree to.
Well, that's the thing. They haven't fought for 3.5 years. And it's bearing in mind the huge might of the Russian military, the size of the country, the population, the number of men who can literally be thrown as cannon fodder by Vladimir Putin. And that is what he's doing in Ukraine. Is so much greater. And yet Ukraine is still holding firm. But crucially, some of the terms that have been looked at, this idea that Putin should be allowed to take the Donbass region, the Donetsk, and but would effectively say, there you go, you can have this section of the industrialized heartland of Ukraine. And then there's basically, in terms of the topography, there's just a free route straight to Kiev and taking the rest of the country. There's no way in the world that any leader of Ukraine would ever agree to that.
It's just not going to happen. And I think we need to look at this thing. We need to take a step back and say, what's really going on here? And what's really going on here is that Putin doesn't want to end this war. And why does Putin want this war in the first place? Is because he needs a war to stay in power. And he needs a foreign enemy to stay in power. And if he's not in power, the Russian people will kill him. That's sort of what
he's got. And this is the thing for people who don't. I mean, look, you had a lot of business dealings with Vladimir Putin. You've met him, you know him, he knows you, and he does not want you to still be around. I think we can safely say, Sir Bill. But the key thing is, what we see in the media here, what we know about what's going on in Ukraine, is not what the Russian people see.
Well, the Russian people don't see anything because they're completely shielded from all information about Ukraine, and so it's. So having said that, the Russian people do see some things. they see that they can no longer get gasoline for their car, and they've got to line up for 4 hours to get gas. Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, it's because the refineries are being bombed. The Russian people see that in certain parts of the country that the boys in their village have all disappeared and aren't coming back home. And so
or coming back wounded.
Coming back totally maimed and wounded. And so it's kind of hard for Putin to carry on this war the way he's carrying on. But the one thing it's absolutely important to point out is that he's not winning this war. This war is at an absolute stalemate. The Russians have not gained any significant territory, and whatever small amount of territory they have gained has been done with enormous human cost. We're talking 1,000 soldiers a day are dying on the Russian battlefield, cannon fodder, as you refer to them, to get meters or hundreds of meters of advantage on the battlefield. The Russians will not win this war, and so Putin, at the same time, he doesn't want to withdraw from this war, and so he put to Trump a set of conditions, knowing that the Ukrainians would not accept.
Yeah.
And so what he's hoping is that he's going to agree with Putin that Ukraine needs to do such and such, and then put it to the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians say no, and then he can say, well, it's
what
not
can
my
I do?
it's not my fault. I still should get the Nobel Peace Prize, but it's not my fault that this thing has not come to the way it should have come. And what he's demanding and what he's talking about is unreasonable. The Russians have been trying to take the Donetsk Oblast since 2014 and have been unsuccessful. Why should he now? Why should Zelensky hand that over? And they won't hand it over.
Well, indeed, and no other country would do. Can I ask you also, just very briefly, there's another story about Russian spies and hard-left humanitarian groups working with people smugglers to flood Europe with illegal migrants. This is according to a Bulgarian Interior Minister, Daniel Mitov, who said his government had evidence that Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service has direct links with the criminal gangs, basically facilitating the illegal immigration into the European Union. Do you believe that is the case?
Absolutely, and this is a strategy of Putin's from the very beginning. If you remember, he was carpet bombing Syria. And why was he carpet bombing Syria? For one simple reason. He wanted to create 5 million refugees who would flood into Europe because he understood that would be destabilizing, that all of a sudden in Germany and everywhere, there are all these people saying, well, we don't like these foreigners. What are they doing here? That's bad for us. And he's created all sorts of political divisions all over Europe because of that. It's absolutely certain that the Russian security services are doing this because this is what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Sir Bill Browder, always so good to talk to you. So appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very much indeed. Sam Armstrong. Just on that final note, we've spoken about Ukraine a bit earlier, but I mean, we talk the illegal migrant issue, huge issue in this country. There is no doubt at all, it's about organised criminals. It's about people who want to have a better life and criminals often escaping other jurisdictions as well. We know that on a grand scale. But there is now this evidence that actually there are nefarious international forces who are deliberately trying to destabilise Western democracies with this.
Well, we saw it with Colonel Gaddafi, of course. He would turn on the flow on and off of refugees coming up, or supposed refugees coming up from Libya, and he would use that as a tool to get better, to exact better.
Well, in Turkey as well, Erdogan does that. Oh, I've got 5 million Syrians here. Oh, I think I might make them leave. Or can I have some more money, please?
And I can tell you something for free. These people laugh at us. They mock us. These are the strong men, and they think what we do is just pathetic.
Yeah, indeed. We need some strong men, but could they be democratically elected, please?